RJ Jenkins never planned on settling down. For years, he'd travel across the South in a beat-up food truck, feeding smoked ribs to oil field workers, music festival crowds, and even a few minor celebrities who raved about his brisket like it came straight from heavens. Smoker. But at 46, after years of grinding smoke and diesel, RJ decided it was time to park for good. He bought a fixer-upper with a detached garage in a gated community called Brisket Region, named that scene Ed like destiny, and started building the pit stop smokehouse right there on his own land. The idea was simple: a small, legal BBQ stand with a community feel. The zoning allowed for mixed use. Everything was cleared with the city. What RJ didn't count on was the iron grip of the neighborhood's HOA. At first, it all looked friendly. The HOA president, a woman named Marla Vaughn, showed up with a glass of sweet tea and a plastic smile the day he opened his pit. "Cute little setup," she said, eyeing the meat thermometer like it was a weapon. "We do value tradition here. Peace, uniformity." RJ had nodded politely and went back to his ribs. He thought she was just another curious neighbor with a clipboard and too much free time. But within the week, he started getting letters, noise, complaints, parking violations, unauthorized signage, even a notice that his custom-built smoker violated aesthetic harmony. But RJ had done his homework. The lot was zoned commercial residential, just like for others in the neighborhood. His permits were all signed off. He posted a framed copy of them next to the register, just in case. At first, it was laughable. His regulars, mostly neighbors, cops, and delivery guys, joked about the brisket war. People even started hashtagging their food pics. #BrisketFreedom. But it stopped being funny the night his smoker shut off. RJ had just loaded up the oak wood and settled the brisket for the overnight slow cook. Everything was on schedule, but when he opened up the smoker at 6 a.m., the pit was cold, meat ruined, fans turned away. Business halted. That morning, he followed the power line from the smoker to the side of the garage. The extension cord had been yanked, not tripped, not loosened, yanked hard, with the plug scratched like someone used a boot to wrench it out. He squatted next to the fuse box and spotted them. Footprints, 2, maybe 3 sets, fresh in the dirt, leading from his side yard to the property line. And a few feet away, a stubbed-out cigar. Marla smoked cigars. The ones, cheap vanilla-scented things that left a sticky residue in the air whenever she showed up at board meetings, according to his neighbor, Debbie. That night, RJ didn't sleep. He reran the camera wiring on his front gate, added a trail cam pointing toward the backyard, and started locking the smoker like it was gold. His chef, Melinda, offered to do overnight watch. RJ declined, but thanked her. They were just selling food. Why was it starting to feel like war? The next day, Marla passed by in her golf cart. "Slow morning?" she asked, voice sugary. "Power outage?" RJ replied without looking up. Gotta be careful with old equipment. Things sure out real easy." She tapped the side of her cart with one perfectly manicured finger, then rolled off down the road. As she turned the corner, RJ saw someone duck behind the hedges, someone wearing an HOA badge around his neck. That night, as he reviewed the trail cam footage on his laptop, the screen showed movement, 2 figures creeping in from the side gate. One tall, one shorter and stocky. The timestamp matched the hours his smoker lost power. RJ leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about barbecue," he muttered. "This is something else." He clicked pause and zoomed in. The shorter guy. He had a name patch on his jacket, Clyde. That wasn't a neighbor. That was the contractor Marla once brought around for pest control. And now, he was crawling around RJ's yard at 2 a.m. Something deeper was going on. Sabotage was one thing, but bringing outsiders in, that meant cover-up, or worse, something illegal. RJ picked up his phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Dex, it's me. I think I've got a problem, and it might be federal." RJ Jenkins wasn't the kind of man to jump to conclusions. But after spotting Clyde's face in the trail cam footage and remembering Marla's smug comment about old equipment, he knew this wasn't just HOA nitpicking anymore. This was coordinated. And he'd seen enough smoky backroom deals on the road to know when something stank worse than spilled ribs. The next morning, the HOA struck again, but this time, on paper, a fresh letter, stamped urgent, sat on his doorstep like a threat dressed as a memo. Subject: excessive noise during operating hours, notice of violation number 023, possible fines pending review. Was RJ nearly laughed. His smoker wasn't louder than a lawnmower, and his little Bluetooth speaker barely covered the sizzle of meat. Still, he kept his cool. Instead of arguing, he installed a decibel meter right above the smoker. It tracked sound levels and saved the data to his cloud account. If they were going to play dirty, he'd play smart. That Friday, RJ did his usual Friday brisket bash. A steady stream of neighbors, Amazon drivers, and local nurses grabbed takeout and sat on the patio enjoying pulled pork sliders and cornbread. No loud music, no shouting, just happy mouths and full plates. The decibel meter read an average of 62 decibels, legal limit in the city, 75 decibels. Meanwhile, across the street, Marla hosted her regular ladies' wine and float night by the pool. What began as quiet giggles turned into karaoke shrieking, followed by what sounded like someone breaking a lawn chair in half. RJ's meter spiked to 82 decibels. He downloaded the data, time-stamped the chart, and emailed it along with a polite rebuttal to the horror board. No response. Instead, they retaliated. Saturday morning, RJ woke up to find the shared parking lot barricaded with orange cones and private event do not park signs. There was no event. RJ walked across the street to Clyde, who stood there leaning against a truck with the logo Marla Property Solutions slap on the side in crooked vinyl. Need help moving those cones? RJ asked. Clyde chewed a toothpick slowly. Don't think that's your call, boss man. RJ nodded. Okay then. He walked back inside, dialed his food truck crew, and wheeled the smoker right onto his own front lawn. He opened the sidewalk and called it curbside barbecue and blues. Then he pulled out his guitar. That night, he strummed slow blues tunes while Melinda served burnt ends out of compostable trays. Neighbors pulled out lawn chairs. Someone brought string lights. Within 2 hours, the crowd had doubled. Best brisket this side of the Mississippi, one man shouted, holding up a rib like a trophy. It was the first time in weeks RJ felt the fire of joy again. But joy doesn't last long when sabotage is still in the air. The following Monday, RJ got a visit from his insurance agent. Someone had filed a complaint against the pit stop, claiming they slipped on grease runoff and were injured. The claim was serious enough to freeze part of his liability coverage. RJ reviewed his cameras again. At first, nothing. But then there was. A man in a hoodie poured a slick liquid onto the sidewalk just before walking in and pretending to fall. He wasn't one of RJ's customers. He was Gerald Tate, HOA treasurer. And judging by the car he climbed into, afterward, Clyde's beat-up pickup, RJ paused the footage and stared. This wasn't harassment. It was a full-blown effort to destroy his business. He called Debbie Tran, board secretary, the only person on the whore who'd ever treated him like a human being. Debbie, I need to talk, RJ said. There was a long pause. I've been expecting your call, she replied. I think it's time someone showed you the emails. Debbie Tran never meant to become a whistleblower. She joined the whore board for simple reasons like making sure the neighborhood park got new mulch and the speed bumps didn't rattle her groceries. But somewhere between Marla Vaughn's rise to HOA president and Gerald Tate's mysterious contractor invoices, the board meetings turned into whispered strategy sessions that made Debbie sick to her stomach. So when RJ called asking for help, she didn't hesitate. They met quietly at the back booth of a gas station cafe just outside the neighborhood. No whore eyes, no gossiping neighbors. I can't send the emails, she said, sliding him a flash drive across the table. But they're on here. Password smokehouse. I figured you'd remember that one. RJ looked at her carefully. Are you safe? Debbie laughed bitterly. I'm not the one with trail cams and fake injury claims, but I will say this Marla's not doing this because of your smoker. She's protecting something. Or someone. RJ nodded and pocketed the drive. What he found on it changed everything. Inside were 6 months worth of email threads between Marler, Gerald, Clyde, and a few other board members. They weren't just casually discussing nuisance policy, they were coordinating actions against him. One message from Gerald read, RJ is gaining attention. Press and Yelp. We need to neutralize the distraction. Clyde says he can apply pressure discreetly. I approve the $600 out of community engagement funds. Another, I've handled the noise complaint personally. Whether it's real or not doesn't matter. Let's drown him in paperwork. One thread, labeled the contractor, mentioned Clyde by name despite Marla claiming he was never officially hired. And then came the photo. RJ clicked to open, blurry. Time-stamped from 2 weeks ago, it showed Clyde and 2 other men outside his restaurant at night, near the fuse box. The caption, they'll get it done tonight. Just make sure the board minutes don't show a meeting. RJ leaned back in his chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just underhanded, it was organized, premeditated sabotage. And Clyde, he wasn't acting alone. He ran the photo through an old app. Dex had shown him basic facial recognition linked to public mugshots. Within seconds, it hit Luther Lou Grady, former repo man turned freelance muscle, known for minor assault and intimidation cases. Marcus McDean, once arrested for tampering with evidence in a contractor fraud case. Both men had loose connections to Clyde's old contracting jobs. Neither were licensed for anything anymore. Yet here they were lurking around his smoker in the middle of the night. RJ knew the next step. He forwarded the photos and email trail to Dex. 30 minutes later, his brother called. You're sitting on more than HOA drama. Man, Dex said, there's potential RICO implications if this connects to financial fraud or repeat intimidation. I'm talking federal. RJ's head spun. You serious? I've already reached out to someone in the bureau. Quietly, they're watching now. Meanwhile, back at Brisket Ridge, Marler was tightening the screws. A new emergency board session was scheduled with one item on the agenda. Motion to revoke commercial privileges of lot number 47, permanent cease of business operations. They were going for the kill shot. RJ didn't panic. Instead, he fired back. That Friday, a framed sign appeared next to his smoker. Free brisket tasting. All HOA board members welcome. Melinda raised an eyebrow. You expecting any of them to show up? RJ grinned. Not really. But the cameras are rolling just in case they do. As the sun set, Clyde's pickup drove slowly past the stand. RJ saw him eyeing the sign, then turning the corner without stopping. The next morning, RJ's front yard was trashed. Splinter patio chairs, overturned trash bins, even a dead raccoon stuffed in his mailbox. He stood staring at the mess when Melinda walked up holding her phone. Boss, you should see this. She showed him a security clip from the night before, the Goons. Same two as before, but this time, Clyde was with them, and they weren't wearing masks. Even better, they stared straight into the camera before smashing a bottle of lighter fluid against the smoker and walking off laughing. They didn't know the audio had recorded their conversation. RJ rewound the footage and listened. The sun had barely risen when RJ stood alone in front of his scorched mailbox. A charred streak of black cut across his front lawn like a warning. The smoker, usually the pride of his setup, was stained with the stench of lighter fluid and fear. The raccoon in the mailbox, removed by animal control before breakfast. But the message was loud and clear. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was escalation. Melinda arrived 20 minutes later. A travel mug in one hand and a tire iron in the other. You sure we're still sieving ribs today? She asked, eyes on the smoker. RJ didn't answer right away. He watched the trail cam footage again on his phone. Clyde, Lou, and Mac laughing, throwing that bottle, threatening arson like it was a joke. The arrogance in their voices made his jaw tighten. "They think this ends with me quitting," he said. "I say it ends with someone in handcuffs." He dialed Dex stop by noon. RJ's brother was parked out front in an unmarked SUV. Wearing jeans and a field jacket with a badge barely visible at his hip, Dex wasn't officially there yet, but his experience as a federal fire investigator meant his presence carried weight. More importantly, he came with a black case and a thermal scanner. They started by combing the area near the smoker. Dex found small patches of oily residue embedded in the dirt, mostly near the air vents. A second scan revealed the trail ran all the way from the street to the rear of the property, as if someone had been sloppy, very sloppy. Letter fluid, probably commercial grade, Dex muttered, but mixed with something thicker, like transmission fluid. Homemade accelerant, enough to light up the pit, RJ asked, easily. But they didn't use the right ignition source. "Lucky you caught it early." RJ stared at the smoker. "What if I hadn't?" Dex gave a grim nod. "Then we'd be talking about manslaughter charges." That afternoon, Dex bagged several samples and took photos of the footprints. "Clear impressions, thanks to yesterday's rain," he quietly sent everything to a bureau contact in Austin. "Just hang tight," he told RJ. "Let them move first. We need to catch Marla's hand in this." But RJ wasn't the sitting tight type. Instead, he returned to the horror email threads Debbie had given him. One stood out. Subject: cleanup budget approval. Marla to Gerald. Tell Clyde he'll be reimbursed for hazard mitigation services. Use the community emergency line item. Keep the invoice under $2,000 so it doesn't trigger board approval. It was dated the morning after the attempted fire. RJ forwarded it directly to Dex. Meanwhile, Marla was doubling down. She released a community newsletter accusing the Pit Stop Smokehouse of creating unsafe air quality and unsanitary food conditions. She called for a neighborhood safety review and hinted at a petition to revoke RJ's right to operate. But the neighborhood didn't buy it anymore. People had seen the patrol cars. They'd seen RJ scrubbing his yard at sunrise and replacing busted patio chairs by noon. His quiet strength was beginning to win hearts, while Marla's smoke and mirrors campaign began to unravel. That evening, RJ held a thank you night with free pulled pork sandwiches for anyone who brought a lawn chair. Nearly 50 people showed up, among them Debbie Tran, who slipped him another flash drive and whispered, "You didn't get this from me." Inside were HOA board meeting recordings illegally made by Gerald Tate. Apparently for his own insurance, RJ scrolled through and found it. A recording from 2 nights ago, Marla's voice. "If he doesn't shut it down, Clyde will handle it. No cameras this time, no witnesses. Make it look like an accident." There it was, the nail. But just before RJ could press play again, he got a knock at the side gate. It was Clyde. Alone. No pickup, no Lou, no Mac. Just him, in a black hoodie, hands shoved into his pockets. "I wanna talk," Clyde muttered, eyes flicking over his shoulder. "I'm not doing this anymore. You weren't supposed to get hurt." RJ didn't say a word. He simply opened the gate and let him in. Clyde wasn't a man known for apologies, but standing in RJ's backyard under the glow of string lights, he looked more like a worn-out mechanic than the guy who had slashed tires and dumped grease on sidewalks. His hand shook slightly as he pulled a crumpled envelope from his hoodie pocket and held it out. "I was told to make it messy," he said, "but not like this, not with fire." RJ didn't reach for the envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof, payment records, fake invoices, stuff I was told to submit for hazard control." Marla made it seem like cleanup work. "Said the smoke from your pit was a health concern." Clyde's voice dropped. "I didn't know she meant sabotage. Not at first." RJ finally took the envelope. Inside were printed invoices, all labeled under property maintenance. All just under $2,000. Dates matched the vandalism incidents. The night the smoker was unplugged, the sidewalk grease. Even the failed arson attempt. "Why now?" RJ asked quietly. Clyde shrugged. You got the feds sniffing. Your brother don't play. And I've got a daughter down in Houston who's already got one parent in prison. I'm not going down for murder. RJ studied him. What about the other two? Lou and Mac. They're ghosts now. Marla told them to disappear till this blew over. Paid M extra. And what did she promise you? Clyde smiled bitterly. A long-term contract to manage the neighborhood grounds. It was never about the grass. Before he left, Clyde handed RJ a burner phone. If the feds want to talk, this is my number. But keep my name quiet. She's got people. That night, RJ forwarded everything to Dex Clyde's documents, a new copy of the audio recording, and the timeline. Dex's response was short, good, they're prepping a warrant. But the war wasn't over. Marla made her next move the very next morning. A letter was posted on every door in the community. Special Emergency VOTE Horror Board petition to remove commercial activity on lot #for7. The vote would be held in 2 days. If passed, the horror would officially ban any commercial business from operating in Brisket Ridge, including the Pit Stop Smokehouse. RJ laughed dryly when he read it. Of course, when fire doesn't work, they pull out ballots. Melinda wasn't amused. She's trying to bury you again. RJ knew he couldn't fight this with Brisket alone, so he called Debbie. That afternoon, they met in the back room of a real estate office she borrowed from her cousin. She brought spreadsheets, ones that weren't supposed to exist. Here's how she's been moving HOA funds, Debbie said, pointing to a list of payments, community events, parking enforcement, grounds maintenance, all go into Marla or Clyde under different aliases, most of it under the table. RJ scanned the documents. That's wire fraud. Debbie nodded. And misuse of HOA funds. The board didn't vote on any of this. She's been signing the checks herself. Gerald helped, but now he's trying to play dumb. RJ grinned. Let him. We don't need him to talk. We've got paper, audio. And Clyde. That night, RJ didn't sleep. He spent hours on his laptop, creating a simple flyer for the entire neighborhood. It wasn't flashy, just bold, honest, and to the point. Did you know your HOA dues paid for these crimes? Evidence inside. He listed the sabotage, the threats, and the shady financials. Then he added a QR code that linked to a secure website. Dex helped him build one filled with recordings, scan emails, and legal documents. No accusations, just facts. The next morning, every mailbox in Brisket Ridge had a copy, and by noon, his website had over 400 visits. Marla responded the only way she knew how, by calling an emergency HOA press conference. She stood in front of the clubhouse in a red blazer, flanked by a visibly sweating Gerald and new lawyers who looked more confused than confident. We deny all allegations, she said. These are the lies of a man trying to smear our neighborhood's values for his personal gain. RJ didn't even need to reply, because that's when the black SUVs arrived. Federal agents stepped out, walked right past the reporters, and handed Marla a sealed folder. The color drained from her face. She wasn't arrested, not yet, but she was served. The look on her face told RJ everything he needed to know. She had no idea who she'd been messing with. RJ Jenkins stood just inside his screen door, arms crossed, watching the black SUVs roll through Brisket Ridge like storm clouds creeping over blue skies. The neighbors peeked through blinds. Some came out barefoot with mugs of coffee in hand, pretending to water lawns. But everyone knew something serious had arrived, and it was about time. Across the street, Marla Vaughn froze on the clubhouse steps as a federal agent, tall and expressionless, handed her a sealed envelope. Behind him, another agent nodded at Gerald Tate, who looked like he might melt into the pavement. They weren't here to play. Inside the envelope was a subpoena, official, signed. Marla opened it with shaking fingers as her lawyer whispered behind. Her dog Clyde had flipped out, and now the bureau was listening. Back at the pit stop, RJ met Dex near the smoker, now fully operational and armored with a new lock system. She know it was you? Dex asked, motioning to the scene across the street. Doesn't matter anymore. RJ said, she's not coming back from this. Dex pulled out a tablet and tapped into the bureau's secure system. The documents you gave us, they matched. Another HOA case in Oklahoma, same structure, same pattern. Funds moved through fake contractor payouts, commercial suppression tactics, and intimidation. RJ blinked. Wait. You're telling me this isn't just Marla's mess? Dex nodded. She's part of a bigger operation, one we've been following. That changed everything. Turns out, Marla wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a gear in a regional fraud scheme run through volunteer boards and community projects people like her used HOA power to funnel money, bury zoning violations, and squash small business competition. And RJ, he just happened to shine too bright. His BBQ joint attracted attention, local media, Yelp bloggers, even a food truck network that started scouting Brisket Ridge for other pop-ups. Marla couldn't risk exposure, so she tried to shut him down and failed. Now the bureau had Clyde in a secure location, giving statements, and that burner phone full of texts from Marla. No feds, be smart, keep it clean, do not talk to the brisket guy again. All recovered, all admissible. RJ leaned back against the smoker, exhaling slowly. So what happens now? Dex looked up. Now, we build the case, but it gets messy before it gets clean. You'll need to keep your cool, and messy it got. 2 days later, an anonymous post flooded the neighborhood Facebook group. Jenkins, paid to frame our HOA. FBI connections used to destroy small communities like ours. Photos of RJ talking to Dex were attached, along with wild claims about a government plot to privatize BBQ through intimidation. RJ shook his head as he read it, then glanced over at Melinda. They're going conspiracy theory now. They're panicking, she replied, which means we're close. But the smear worked at least partially. Some neighbors began pulling their support. A few stopped showing up for curbside orders. Someone egged RJ's smoker during the night. And the next morning, a hand-painted sign appeared across the street. No more deep state BBQ. RJ almost left until he saw Gerald Tate watching from his porch. Eyes narrow, lips tight. Dex didn't laugh. He tightened security around the case, warning RJ that when people like Marla start going down, they drag everyone they can with them. I've seen this before, Dex said. She'll find someone to blame, and if she gets desperate enough, she'll do something real stupid. That prediction came true faster than expected. A week later, a fire inspector arrived at RJ's store with an emergency citation. Someone had filed a report claiming his smoker was emitting chemical smoke inconsistent with natural wood. The citation came with a forced 3-day shutdown for inspection. But RJ was ready. He handed the inspector a notarized certificate from the city's air quality department cleared just the week before, and then he handed over a copy of the footage from his security camera. Gerald and a mystery man sneaking around the side yard again, carrying a jug. This time, the man wasn't Mac or Lou. This guy wore a polo shirt with a logo, Sterling HOA Management, Dallas Division. Dex's jaw clenched when he saw the footage. That's not just local, he said. That's another link in the fraud chain. RJ turned back toward his smoker and smiled faintly. They really don't know who they're messing with. RJ Jenkins had cooked for governors, mayors, and even a country singer who claimed his brisket brought her to tears. But nothing compared to prepping for the backyard pitmaster's invitational down in San Antonio. Regional BBQ showdown, where the best of the best came with knives, smokers, and secrets. But this year, RJ wasn't just there to win. He was bait. The plan had come together fast. After Dex identified the mystery man in the surveillance footage, a regional rep from Sterling HOA Management, the bureau connected the dots. Sterling had been linked to fraudulent HOA boards across 3 states. If they could get Marla or her contacts to talk openly at the festival, unrecord, it might crack the whole ring. RJ agreed to play his part. He'd enter under the pit stop smokehouse, invite the usual suspects, and let the feds watch from the shadows. Hidden mix, drones. Overhead, cameras tucked in food tents. If Marla took the bait, the sting would light up like mesquite. The morning of the festival was perfect. Smoky air curled up from rows of trailers and custom smokers. Tongues clinked. Laughter floated over the sound of country tongue and sizzling RIBS RJ set up between two well-known competitors. Melinda was on side prep, wearing an apron that said, "Call me when it's crisp." Even she didn't know how deep the sting went, just enough to keep her safe. Dex stayed out of sight. But RJ knew he was there, probably in the black Vin park near the porta potties. Classic bureau camouflage. By noon, the crowds rolled in. So did Marla. She wore oversized sunglasses, a red sun hat, and walked like someone who'd never attended a BBQ event in her life. But she wasn't alone. Gerald followed close behind, pale and sweating through his shirt. With them was Sterling Rep number 2. A man RJ only knew as Carl from the flak contractor list Debbie had found. RJ stayed calm, slicing brisket like he was hosting Sunday supper. Mara approached the booth with fake cheer. Well, if it isn't the famous pitmaster," she said. "Didn't think you'd show your face around a community event." RJ handed her a sample tray. "I'm always happy to serve people, even the ones who tried to burn my smoker." Her smile wavered. Carl stepped forward. "We've actually been looking at your setup. Very efficient. Ever think of franchising?" RJ didn't blink. "Not yet." "I like being hands-on." Gerald leaned in. "You could be part of something bigger. Get out from under the neighborhood drama and expand. No more HOA hassle." Marla cut in sharply. "If you play your cards right, we could clear your permit issues permanently. But it goes both ways." "Jenkins?" RJ cocked his head. "You offering a deal?" She smiled. "Let's just say some things are best handled off the books." Boom. That was the wire captured every word. RJ kept the act going. "How about we talk more after judging? I've got a rack of ribs that needs attention." Marla nodded. "Smug. We'll find you." 2 hours later, the Pit Stop Smokehouse was announced as a finalist. Crowd clapped. Judges raved about the bark on the brisket. RJ accepted the certificate without a word. Behind the scenes, Dex moved fast. Agents closed in 3 on Carl, 2 on Gerald, and 1 calmly placing a hand on Marla's shoulder as she turned to leave. "You're being detained under suspicion of conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction, and interstate racketeering," the agent said. Marla gasped. "What? This was a friendly visit." Carl wasn't as graceful. He bolted for the parking lot, only to be tackled beside the fried pickle stand. RJ stood by the smoker, arms crossed, as the scene played out. Melinda appeared behind him, frowning. "What the heck is going on?" RJ smiled. "Justice, served hot." By evening, the story hit local news. BBQ festival sting uncovers HOA corruption ring across 3 states. Marla's face was on every screen, flanked by headlines calling her the horror queen of fraud. The backlash hit Brisket Ridge fast. Emergency meetings, resignations. Neighbors who had once sided with Marla now posted apology notes in RJ's mailbox, and Debbie, she was offered a position as interim president. But RJ didn't celebrate just yet, because there was still one name missing from every report. Lou, the man who tried to light the smoker, who vanished. Dex called that night. "He's gone underground. But we're tracking a lead in New Mexico. Don't relax just yet." RJ looked at the pit stop sign, swinging gently in the night breeze. "I'm not relaxing," he said. "I'm just reloading." 3 weeks had passed since the BBQ festival. Sting, the HOA board had been dissolved. Marla Vaughn was in federal custody awaiting arraignment. Gerald had flipped and entered witness protection. Carl was talking to, but only to save himself. Brisket Ridge was quieter now, calmer. Lawns got mowed. Kids rode bikes. The only line being drawn was the one outside the Pit Stop Smokehouse, where business had tripled. But RJ Jenkins couldn't relax, because Luke Grady, Marla's silent enforcer, the one who slipped through the cracks, was still out there, and RJ knew from experience. A man like Lou doesn't just run. He watches, he waits, and when the smoke clears, he comes back to finish what he started. It was a Saturday night when the final spark came. RJ had just closed shop. Melinda was locking up the payment tablet, and a soft country tune drifted out of the Bluetooth speaker. The last customer had left an hour ago. The coals were dying down. That's when the motion sensor on the smoker camera triggered a ping. RJ glanced at his phone. The alert showed someone near the smoker tall, broad, with a hoodie pulled over their head. The face wasn't clear, but the stance was familiar. RJ didn't wait. He grabbed the bat behind the register and stepped outside, quiet as a ghost. Melinda stayed inside. She didn't ask questions. She knew the drill. She crept round the patio and saw him. Lou, just standing there beside the smoker, like nothing had changed. I thought you'd be long gone, RJ said, voice calm, but resting over his shoulder. Lou turned, smiled. I was Arizona, then El Paso. Thought about disappearing for good, but unfinished business don't sit right with me. You here to finish what Marla started. Lou shook his head slowly. Marla was a clown. She had her schemes. I just wanted to make money. You almost burned my place down. You were never supposed to be in the picture, Lou said. But now, all these feds crawling around, I got nothing. No cash, no car, just her secrets rattling round in my head. RJ narrowed his eyes. So why come back? Lou reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out a thumb drive. Because you're the only one still standing, and I got insurance, names, accounts, not just Marla, others, big ones, HOA guys in Phoenix, Houston, even parts of Vegas. You want to hand that over to me? Lou nodded. You give it to your Fed brother. I don't care, but I need out, off the radar, no more trails. I disappear, clean. You never hear from me again. RJ stared at him. What makes you think I trust a guy who tried to light my pit on fire? Lou shrugged. Because I didn't. I stopped Mac from doing it. I unplugged the lighter. You ever wonder why the accelerant didn't catch? RJ paused. Prove it. Lou walked to the smoker, tapped the firebox, and pointed to a small metal weld inside the lid. One RJ hadn't noticed before. See that? Lou said. That's your igniter relay. I snipped the fuse wire. You would have found it. Eventually, RJ clenched his jaw. Why? Lou looked him dead in the eye. Because deep down, I like a man who fights back. An hour later, Dex sat in RJ's kitchen reviewing the thumb drive. His expression turned cold as the files loaded. You're looking at bank records, digital contracts, and something better, Dex said. Voice memos, meetings between HOA officials in 3 states. Lou's been collecting insurance in more ways than one. RJ leaned forward. What's next? Dex closed the laptop. Next, National Task Force. And your name's gonna show up on a few law school lectures as the guy who smoked out of federal cons. Piracy with a brisket knife. Brisket Rich changed after that. The new HOA board was volunteer only, with Debbie Tran as acting president. There were no more secret meetings. No backdoor votes. Clyde moved to Houston to be closer to his daughter, officially clear as a cooperating witness, and the pit stop expanded. RJ opened a second location just outside San Antonio with Melinda as co-owner and his old smoker proudly displayed in the window. Char marks and all. He never saw Lou again. But every time a new envelope arrived from the bureau filled with updates and photos of arrests, RJ smiled a little wider. They tried to bury him in smoke, but he built an empire from the ashes. Final call to action. They sabotaged his business, sent goons after his smoker, and dragged him through a web of lies. But RJ turned the fire back on them. If you stuck through to the end, don't forget to share this story with someone who loves justice and BBQ. And remember, some fires don't destroy, they forge legends.